Welcome, everybody. I think we can start. I cannot see you, but yes, happy World Book Day. So what a week is today is World Book Day, and it was also Earth Day earlier this week. So this is a celebration of the combination of both. So we are very happy that you are here. Welcome, everybody. I'm Graciela Melitsko Thornton. I lead the enthusiastic creative green team at Julie's Bicycle. For the ones that don't know us, Julie's Bicycle is an international non-profit uniting culture, creativity, and climate action to drive change. We work from practice to policy, and we help the creative community in all sectors to lead the way on climate action. And there's always a story behind the activities we do. I'm not going to be long because we got three fantastic speakers and I don't want to take too much time, but I think it's worthwhile also to say a little bit what it means for us. We are all book lovers at Julie's Bicycle, so it means a lot. And a few years ago, we started a pilot project with CILIP that Maja will tell us a little bit more. CILIP is the Library and Information Association in the UK. So we started this a pilot on green libraries. This is now evolving into a larger project that is the Green Libraries Partnership. Then last year, we collaborated with the Institute de Coedición in Barcelona, in Spain, to create a sustainability guide for book fairs. This is available in Catalan, in Spanish, and in English. And this was done with the support of the Catalan Institute of Cultural Enterprises. And the guide includes case studies, links to additional resources, and also an editable checklist that then we started looking at the overall sector. So this is not to show off, but it's a resource that is available on our website. Our first approach was that the publishing, and after that, we also engaged with book fairs in Latin America and the Caribbean. We also engage with book fairs and literary projects in the UK through the Arts Council England program that is also at Julie's Bicycle. So there's been a lot of different conversations. For today, we will call the book sector. No? And our first approach was that the publishing sector has the power and the potential to shift towards a circular economy, better design, more efficient supply chain, implement energy efficiency, reduce the impact of their events, and also share knowledge and inspiration for a just transition worldwide. All the supply chains these days are global, so there is a very interesting global conversation as well here. And putting this into action requires collaboration and research across the entire sector: writers, publishers, printers, wholesalers, distributors, booksellers, libraries, of course, and all the readers in a community, no? And our frameworks are systemic, and we want to encourage a whole sector conversations. We encourage really to work on our engagement between everybody in the sector. And this is why a few months ago, with my colleague Tenaya King, that is here helping in the background with today's webinar. Thank you, Tenaya. So we started a very concise research effort, and we got some support also from the World of Books to do this research. And we want to understand better where the book sector stands in terms of climate action and sustainability, as well as the gaps, the needs, the challenges. And this webinar is a public activity as part of this work, and we are very grateful to all the fantastic speakers we have today who will be sharing their experience to continue a collective understanding and to explore new ways to tackle the challenges of the climate crisis. And I'm going to stop here. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, that is Piers Torday. Piers Torday's Last Wild series of children books looks at themes like biodiversity loss, including the wild before, a showcase attempt at publishing. I'm interested in the word attempt, so I will ask you later. Publishing a sustainable book. Your play stores like the Box of Delights and the Wind in the Wiltons were produced also to sustainability standards with the Theatre Green Book. I think that's also very interesting in terms of the cross collaboration in the cultural sector. Piers has been a judge for the Sustainable Story Award and is also the first chair of the UK Society of Authors, who holds a Sustainability Network Steering Committee. So we open the microphone for you. Piers, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Graciela, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here, particularly with Julie's Bicycle, who have, as Graciela referenced in her generous introduction, done so much work with theatre as a cultural sector in the UK to make that a more sustainable industry. And publishing and books, I think, has huge potential to go on the same journey, but has a long way to go. But I'm going to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes with a presentation. I'm going to sort of take you through my involvement and how really a creative conversation about the climate crisis has led to a practical conversation about actually making the creative industry I mainly work in, publishing, try and make it a more sustainable one. So I'm just going to share my presentation. So I hope everyone can see that. And for everyone watching, this is really, I think, of all the creative industries, I think it's quite easy as an author in publishing, which is a multinational, multi-billion pound industry, to feel quite powerless when it comes to issues of sustainability and climate change. And I'm here to say that you needn't. I got into this because just over 10 years ago, I wrote a series of books called The Last Wild. And that was a response, a creative fictional response to this shocking news that we had lost over 60% of the wildlife on this planet since I was born in the 1970s. And it was news to everyone. I mean, I think everyone was aware of biodiversity loss, but not quite to the extent which was revealed by the WWF and UN report over 10 years ago. And so I wanted to write a story for children that engaged them, not in abstract terms, but emotional, active terms with the climate crisis. And it's about a little boy who finds himself in a world where a mysterious virus, not that one, a different one, has killed nearly all the animals left on Earth. And he sets out to try and save them. And it's a story, but it's a real story for us as well. And those books have been translated all around the world. And it's been a huge privilege. And it's sent me all around the world to festivals and schools and libraries, speaking to children about, yes, writing and reading and the value of those things, but also very much about the climate crisis and what children can do, and trying to always to spread a positive message to children, a message of hope that small actions taken at scale, whether it's not using a plastic water bottle or turning the lights off before you leave a room, taken at scale, will make a difference. And most of all, that the climate crisis is not their fault and it's not on their shoulders to fix it, although they will be part of the solution. And of course, that's led me beyond the world of schools and festivals to more active work in the climate arena. And I've spoken at Extinction Rebellion protests, and I've been involved with conservation work, such as working with the former UK Wool Trust with this wonderful wolf here, who is an animal that features highly in my books. And that was my level of involvement with the climate crisis. I wrote about it creatively. I was involved on the periphery of the politics and in things like conservation. And then in 2020, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, the IPCC released its latest panel global panel report on climate change, and the picture was unbelievably bleak. It was also the same year that Greta Thunberg had been leading school climate strikes, and it was unbelievably hot, and there were wildfires all over the world. And it was in that very, very hot summer, after that report was released, that another author got in touch with me and said, "What is publishing?" He said, "You write about climate change, but what is publishing doing about sustainability and about climate change?" And to my shame and horror, I realized I didn't really have an answer, and I couldn't even tell him anything about whether my books were sustainable. I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about how our books were printed, distributed, the carbon cost of that. And so I realized something needed to change. And just for context, I know everyone who's joining this panel knows what uh, climate change is, but it's very pertinent when we're talking about publishing because we're really focusing on the greenhouse gases. So that's the carbon contribution. And as you know, 175 million tons approximately of greenhouse gases are poured into the atmosphere every day. Those gases will stay there for 100 years. And that is, in terms of the heat we're adding to the planet, that is the equivalent of exploding 750,000 atomic bombs every day. So we are all collectively part of this incredible addition of heat to this very precious planet. And last year was the third hottest year on record. And what is publishing's role in that contribution of heat to the planet? That's what I wanted to find out. And I started doing some digging and speaking to people who were already working in this area. And I discovered some astonishing things. So I don't know if anyone knows, but for approximately every 25 books printed, one tree is chopped down. Um, Now that will vary, of course, according to the size of book, but assuming your sort of average size book. And so just go to a bookshop, go to a library, look at your own bookshelves and work out how many chopped trees are sitting on your shelves. That's not all bad news when it comes to sustainability, because if that book sits on your shelf or a shelf that then is inherited by the people after you, such as in a library, it then becomes very sustainable because it's more than paid for the carbon created to produce it. And of course, bookstores or libraries are in many ways fantastic carbon sinks. Think of all the carbon locked up in the books stored in libraries worldwide. So it's a complicated picture, but the production of new books, as you can see, is carbon intensive. A lot of books you buy in a store will come from managed forestry. Um, but it's very hard to always say how sustainable that managed forestry is. Yes, for the trees that are chopped down to make books, new trees are planted. But there's huge biodiversity loss often involved in commercially managed forests, water runoff, wildlife disappears, and printing, the making of paper to print books and printing are energy intensive processes. So as I began to discover these things, I realized the complexity of the relationship between publishing books and sustainability because there are so many moving parts and different from tree to the book in your hand. There are many, many different stages, and each one of them impacts the environment. When it comes to publishers, I'm quoting from my own publisher, Hachette, a huge international publisher, has generously let me quote the support from a couple of years ago. And to their credit, they're making huge strides in the right direction. But the basic percentages don't change that much. And of course, if you're a publisher, the use of paper accounts for the overwhelming amount of your carbon footprint. There are impacts from, you know, if every publisher used renewable energy in their offices and, the lights go off at night, and if all their employees take public transport to work, and if they employ printers who run on renewable energy and they have a distribution fleet that uses electric vehicles, all that will make a difference. But paper, the use of paper accounts overwhelmingly for publishers' carbon footprint. And I think that's something that's the knotty issue that we have to wrestle with making publishing sustainable is as long as there are printed books, there's going to be quite a high carbon cost to publishing. So it's how we can be most efficient and most mitigate that impact on the environment. The reason for that is paper and pulp, believe it or not, going back to our atomic bomb level greenhouse gases, are the fourth largest global industry and emitter of CO2 into the atmosphere. So 7.5% of greenhouse gas emissions are produced by the paper and pulp industry, which is more than aviation. So that's something. It's really important to say here that paper and pulp includes Amazon packaging and toilet rolls. So publishing is just a part of that, but publishing is wedded to the paper industry. So you can't, it's quite hard to separate the two. But the publishing of books and magazine and print reading material is responsible for a smaller element of that percentage. But paper overall is a large contributor. And it's not just the printing of books that contributes towards climate change, it's the end of life of books. As I said, if you buy a book and you hang on to it for your whole life and someone inherits it, or you gift it to a library, or you gift it to a school and it stays there, that's a very sustainable product. But publishers, as a rule, overprint books. This country is full of warehouses full of books sitting on pallets, some of which will never even get sent to shops because the demand isn't there. They overestimated the consumer demand for that particular title. And equally, bookshops return every week books they've ordered that have not sold, or sometimes books that are damaged or have printing errors, but mainly books that haven't sold. Booksellers and publishers are very reluctant to reveal the figures of how many books are returned because it's commercially sensitive data. So I don't have that. James Daunt, who runs Waterstones in the UK and Barnes & Noble in the US, so collectively two of the biggest book-selling chains in the world, estimated that Waterstones in the UK returns about 7% of the books it orders into its stores. So if you think about how many books they order each week, 7% are sent back and they're pulped, these huge, terrifying rolling pins that crush and destroy the books, an author's nightmare. And that, as you can see, is a very significant part of publishing's greenhouse gas emissions because those machines that pulp books are super carbon intensive. So we want to get to a place where we're not printing more books than will ever be sold, that only in order for those books, whether it's celebrity autobiographies or children's picture books that are just not sold and then pulped and often not recycled effectively because of the numbers of foils and chemicals and colors used to make them. So I'm just going to very briefly share with you the different kinds of journeys books can go on. This is Carnstone, an environmental consultancy, worked with the Independent Publishers Guild, and I sit on the sustainability panel of that guild. And we commissioned this study and haven't got time to go into detail, but just to show you, there are many different journeys books can go on, whether it's a mass market paperback, so that's like your typical detective story or thriller, shrink wrapped and sent in pallets to supermarkets. And it's the sustainable rating of that book even depends on whether you go to the supermarket by car or bike or foot and take it home. And it really varies, those journeys, because if you look at the bottom of the slide, you can also see that we're looking at, say, very colourful, specially printed children's picture books, which have a lot of care, and they might have pop-ups, they might have music in there, they might have flashing lights. Now, those can only really be printed by these specialist printers in China, so they have to come by sea and by freight. So there's a range of different ways books can get in your hand. I would say the most sustainable is often it's funnily enough come from the academic sector of publishing, and that's print on demand. So that's literally where you go into a bookshop and you ask for a book and they haven't got it and they order it and it's actually just It used to be bad quality, but now it's very good quality. It's literally one copy is printed on demand, and it comes to them with their next pallet of book orders with a load of other titles that have been printed on demand. That's the dream in a way, rather than overprinting huge boxes of one title that are very heavy to distribute. You've got to think of the energy costs, particularly at the moment with the war, in a van rattling around our roads, delivering books often, and they're only going to go back in the same van to be pulped. So just to show you really quickly the carbon impact of a book, manufacturing a typical book, the carbon cost is about 4,900 grams. And for comparisons, driving a car for a mile is this 283 grams, and microwaving a bag of popcorn is 16 grams. So I think it's safe to say that there is a distinct and pertinent carbon cost to publishing books, which is so ironic for me, because when you think about how effectively the message about climate change is being communicated in our era, I would say publishing has played an outsized role. When you think of nature writers, political writers, campaigners, they've got their message to the public through books, but the values of the page on which that message is communicated is yet to live up to the values being transmitted via that page. That's what we're talking about. So when I wrote a prequel to that Last World series called The Wild Before, I wanted to try and live up to that. I wanted to try and match those values. And I laid down a challenge to my publisher, Hazet. I said, can we publish a sustainable book? And they said, okay, we'll give it a go. Because I thought I cannot publish more books about climate change that are actually contributing towards climate change. That felt crazy to me. And the example is there. It's a book called The Wild Before. And this was the first ever commercial attempt in the UK to publish a wholly sustainable book. So all the ink is made from vegetable inks. You may not know, but huge amounts of commercial printing ink involves tiny crushed sea creatures to create different colors and particular quality of ink. And I've always wondered how many vegans who don't even wear any animal products in their clothes, never mind what they put in their mouths, know that there is tons of animal products sitting in the printed books on their shelves. It's made from recycled paper. Most books do not use recycled paper. Publishers say it's a quality issue, but it's not recycled. And there is a debate over whether recycled paper is better for the environment than new paper, which I'm happy to take questions on, but my preference is for recycled. The Wibbelin, that's the name for the hard cover of a book, is fully recycled. No varnishes or finishes. The publishers were terrified that meant that in distribution it would get scratched or scuffed and become unsellable. That was not the case. They worked really hard using particular colors, particular graphic design that was resilient to that. And of course, it wasn't distributed with any plastic. And came with a seed card, a seed bookmark you could plant with wildflowers. That book is not wholly sustainable, but you could more or less plant it in the ground and it would just melt away, more or less. Please don't read it though. And just to quickly finish, since that time and publishing that book and the IPCC, I'm pleased to say that change is happening in publishing. We now have the first ever UK Sustainability Industry Forum, and that's never happened before for any issue in publishing. An organisation that has every trade association from agents to booksellers to publishers in the UK are part of this forum trying to make publishing more sustainable. We issued the Publishing Declares Climate Action Pledge, which anyone in the UK is welcome to sign if you work in publishing. Sign our pledge and commit to achieving net zero by 2050. So all the major publishers in the UK are now signed up to that commitment. The Publishers Association has produced a carbon calculator. So when your editor is printing your book, they can put in what kind of book it is, how many pages, what kind of color, paperback or hardback, and work out its carbon cost. There is progress happening all the time. In Denmark, a typeface company has designed a sustainable typeface, which may sound a bit niche, but actually using fewer pages because your typeface is more efficient can cut your carbon costs by 20%. Because the books are lighter to distribute, they take less space to store, they use less paper, and so on and so on. There's an example, the heavyweight Danish novel to the left and the sustainable version to the right. Exactly the same book using a more efficient typeface. Through the Society of Authors, we've done campaigns like My Tree to Me, inviting authors to challenge their publishers on how sustainable their books are. And there's a whole host of stuff that we've done, but there's so much more to do because the publishing supply chain, as I alluded to, is very, very complex. But I'm just going to finish by saying what I've learned on my journey is that in terms of climate action in the creative world, it's about communication, collaboration, and fostering a sense of community determined for change. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Piers. Yeah, that was really fascinating. Thank you for also signposting to different resources. We, as part of this little research, we also publish in our website some of these links. So we will share with everybody at the end of this webinar as well, if you want to have the reference. And I got quite a few questions, but we're going to go to our next speaker first. So I'm going to introduce to Maja Maricevic. She's the Director of Science and Innovation at the British Library. She's also the founding member and former chair of the UK Green Libraries campaign, and she was awarded CILIP's Presidential Citation in 2025 for her contribution to expanding the campaign's reach. She has also served on the advisory group on the UK Research and Innovation Programme Building a Greener Future, and currently chairs London's Knowledge Quarter. And we are working together with Maja also in our Green Libraries project that she will tell us a little bit more about it. So welcome, Maja. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Graciela, for your lovely introduction. And thank you, Piers. I heard this now 2 or 3 times, and every time I learned something. It's so full of facts what you have there. So we are going to move into the area of libraries. And as Graciela said, I'm going to, for those who've never heard of it, try to explain the Green Libraries campaign and what's that all about, and talk a little bit what's happening, what we have achieved, where the challenges are. And if we have time, I would quite like to have a little bit of an international outlook on the libraries and green as well. So I also have a few slides that I'm going to try to share to help me on my way. There we are. Great. And I'm going to try especially to stop in the areas where I think the challenges are, because I think it would be nice to have a discussion around some of these. Libraries. I just want to highlight a little bit complexity and opportunity. When I started working in this area with all different library colleagues, I knew our landscape is complex, but I didn't quite know how complex. So we talk about libraries, but in effect, we talk about many, many different types of institutions with completely different purposes and ways of working. If it's university library, if it's library in a hospital, if it's your public library, there's some very significant differences that make such a big difference to how they operate and also what they can contribute to this particular environmental and green agenda. Also, we kind of slightly overlook, but they are placed in many different spaces across the UK and the world. And because they're so integrated in their communities, that also makes a huge difference, because somebody who's in a coastal community might have completely different kind of priorities and people coming than somebody who's in some very rural agricultural place or somebody who's in some huge city, London or somewhere else. So how libraries experience their users and environment is also informed by that. The other thing is this line, more than books, and it's actually slightly misleading because books in their own right are complicated, and I think Piers has done such amazing work on shedding the light on a physical book. But then these days, the book come in digital formats. They move around in distribution channels that are entirely digital. And some parts of the publishing industry, such as, for example, scholarly publications, are almost entirely digital. So it introduces another level of complexity. It's not secret that we live in a difficult financial and policy environment. There are multiple policy drivers and very uncertain funding streams, which does contribute to the difficulty with engaging with the new agendas. And there is continual technology lag, which is also an issue here, especially if we are looking at the carbon that comes through digital operations, and that's obviously linked to funding. But then there is an immense opportunity which excites me so much. First, reuse and circularity is really defining feature of libraries. Carbon sinks, whatever we are, I don't know. I work at the British Library. That is a pretty big carbon sink, believe me. We say that we have something like 200 million items, and that is, I don't know how many Amazon forests that continues. If we use the Piers's calculation, is quite scary. Information expertise that librarians have is very important, because one of the big issues in environmental and climate world is misinformation, and also passing the information and organizing discussion, and also trust, because it is in the areas where there is misinformation, there's also lack of trust. Serving diverse user and communities, which is important because there are communities that do lots of discussion on climate environment, and there are communities that are divorced from these discussions. So if the libraries can reach out to all sorts of different communities, that is super important. Also, libraries are universal, national, or global infrastructure. We do not have to burn more carbon to build them. They're already there. They're everywhere. We need to use them, and use them for big global problems that we have. And also, there is potential for partnerships and wider green engagement that I'll touch on too. So it's good to see all of that, but we didn't know any of that until relatively recently. So I put there a slide about COP26. This is the big international policy juggernaut event that happens annually, where the great and the good come to discuss climate in different parts of the world. People usually don't remember what they discussed or what they decided, and there is a lot of good things that happen, and there is probably lots of skepticism on all of this. But what happened in 21? COP was in Glasgow, and it was an interesting one because in the libraries community, it gave us a very first opportunity, and maybe we had other opportunities, but we didn't take them. Maybe we didn't have the right leadership at the time, is to think, what are we doing collectively? And it turned out that our colleagues in Scotland were super organized and going for it, and anywhere else, apologies to everywhere else, there are some good examples of good practice, and then there was nothing. In very large parts of the countries, the libraries are not part of discussion. And sorry for people who were doing it before and with some of these good leading examples, but we were really in 21 struggling to find a very good narratives across the country that people in the libraries actually had programs and were going and thinking about this activity. So it was a bit of a wake-up call, especially because we could see that our adjacent sectors like museums or archaeology or some of the heritage branches that are dealing with more of a built environment or land were really much more proactive. That's maybe natural because some of the big areas of climate change, such as flooding or danger to buildings or biodiversity, comes in their direction pretty quickly. But it was obvious that in the library sector, we didn't have a policy or the way to bring ourselves all together to talk about this. And there was such good and urgent reasons to do so. So that was a bit of a galvanizer for everybody to say, okay, what we're going to do. So what we came up with is Green Libraries campaign. It was initially called the Green Libraries Partnership. It started in 2022. It included a number of partners, and actually Julie's bicycle was there from the start at the original meetings that we had about how to put all this together. We brought together all sorts of different libraries, public libraries, national, academic, schools, NHS. And we also wanted to build link with everybody else who is in our sphere of working with books and knowledge and written word and everything else. So it started as a kind of quite big idea of what we might do and what we might want to understand. We came up with a vision that was very broad, better future for planet and people, empowered and supported by librarians and library workers, and mission to place libraries at the heart of environmental change. It was actually surprisingly difficult to come to these because when you put such a big group of people together, people want to do all sorts of different things, and kind of keeping the center stage, the planet and the green issues, as opposed to saving money, which is also important. but keeping this very green environmental focus was some interesting discussion. But in the end, we got there, and it was really good to see that we are thinking of something that's outside ourselves, that we want to influence and contribute. And to help ourselves, one of the first things that we done was to write a Green Libraries manifesto. As I said, there was nothing there at the time that was expressing something that informs the library policy and why libraries and what we are doing and in which direction we are heading. So there is a link down here, but there is a number of things that we put in this manifesto. We wanted to be part of our decision making, to be innovative, to put work with communities at the center of what we do. And that was super important because actually one of the most active parts of environmental work in the libraries was with our very active colleagues who were working with our buildings. And that's really important. And we didn't want to diss that because there's few thousand buildings of libraries across the country. Some of them are very old. So if they are repurposed and they are made better in climate terms and are, much more net zero ready, that is a good thing to do. But there wasn't anything that said that within our work with users and communities, this also has to be center stage. So that was important. Using of the library's voice, especially collective voice, is one thing that we wanted to do, to work in partnership, grow and share knowledge, support young people in what we are doing. So manifesto came out, we didn't know what's going to happen, but actually it was immediately signed by loads and loads of people, and many of them outside the UK, which surprised us quite a lot, and started this journey of building bridges and partnership, which is fantastic. We started holding some conferences simply to bring people together in the same room to discuss. This slide shows millions of different ideas that were coming suddenly from everyone, and we needed to capture that richness and kind of give permission to each other that this is something that we can put in our work and put it center stage of our work. We so far had 3 conferences, and they were very encouraging in so many different ways. And we started Green Libraries Week that you might have heard about or participated in. So this is now an annual event, and this is our collective voice to outside. So conferences are more about librarians and profession. Green Libraries Week is much more about everybody coming together 1 week a year and shouting about climate emergency, about different issues that happen in their communities, and giving advice, giving information, and galvanizing people. It's especially active in public libraries. And here there is a slide from Hampshire, which very nicely shows a very wide range of activities that people very quickly started to develop. And remember that in 21, we were struggling to find enough examples to really talk about. And suddenly as we started, the activity developed so quickly. It was amazing to see. And it covered all sorts of things. So this is a list of Green Libraries activities from 23, I think. And you can see that people were doing craft workshops, eco posters, planting things, doing things in outside spaces, organizing events, especially a lot of children's events. I'm sure, Piers, that lots of your books are read at these events. So there is lots of that going on, lots of different types of reuse things, and lots of focus on environment and the into biodiversity. So that's really great to see. But as I said, there are many different libraries. So I also just want to give you a little bit of feel what happens elsewhere. So engaging NHS libraries, many people don't know even that they exist, but they do exist, and they provide information to across the NHS service. We managed to engage all of them, which is fantastic. And they kind of serve a very specific purpose because they have a link with public health. They provide information and training for the NHS workforce. They purchase lots of stuff that is such a big green impact, what they're purchasing. And they have NHS net zero target, which is an important thing. And then we have academic and research libraries, an amazing group of libraries that are really essential and probably a leading force to inform us about digital innovation. Also about procurement. So libraries buy lots of things, but not all the libraries have the same resources. It is academic libraries that spend millions buying things because they have it, they need it for students, and they have budgets for these things. So people who are going to influence the most what happens on the purchasing end of publishing is academic libraries, and they've really taken to building the green codes for who they want to publish for, where they're going to spend their money, what are the green principles that they expect from people that they're buying from. I mentioned scholarly publication landscape, which operates digitally. There's also lots of green work on campuses, and generally environmental research, science, and education is something that they can bring to the fore. And then national libraries, we have our own role. There are two examples. One's carbon literacy for libraries is something National Library of Scotland did, extremely influential and hardworking in this particular area. And they developed a shareable course that can be used for staff training by all libraries. Unearthed is from the British Library. So this is exhibition that we developed on the power of gardening. That integrated a lot of environmental messages because it's such a subject that people relate to. And then because we do a nationwide model where through something called Living Knowledge Network, we send this exhibition in panels to libraries across the country. This message and this exhibition traveled to many, many different places and reached lots of people. So there is a bit of a reach model, and the way the national libraries can kind of help everybody else on the journey. As the thing started developing, we have started also to pay attention to some of this funding and capacity issue. It is extremely difficult to do this. Having been a chair of Green Libraries campaign and working this hard, and my successor, Lisa McLaren from University of Westminster, is now working hard on this, we have managed to find some funds. So we're starting something called Green Libraries Hubs, where we are trying to establish a place in a public library where people can come and know that they're going to find green information and activities. We were lucky to get some money from the lottery to start 10 hubs across the country. 3 of them are already operational, one in Guildford in Surrey, one in London, and one in the I think what was it, Darwin, thank you. So and there is 10 is going to be overall, but how do we continue that and how we spread that models? There are already Green Library hubs in Scotland, and funding for the library project for public libraries. But how do we create that capacity and how we integrate and make this sustainable is a big question going forward. So there are some challenges. Slightly repeating myself about funding, environment, and uncertain policy, but I don't want just to repeat it. I think we need to be active into building the policy and being very loud in saying what we can do and asking for resources to do that. We're having some really genuinely new challenges. So environmental impact of AI is big for the whole society. And we heard about some impacts where Piers had some book figures. And I think at the moment they're saying that AI is already accounting for 3.7% of global greenhouse gases. But if you think that they're just in the beginning of their journeys and we're expecting this to grow, and there are data centers and the energy routes that are built specifically for AI, that is likely to be really big issue. And the libraries, because we deal with information, we find ourselves pretty much in the mix of all of these things. Sustaining collaborations and partnership is going to be a challenge. Having our own authentic voice and agency, managing competing priorities, everything you would expect me to say. So that's the UK, but I just want to spend literally 2 minutes saying a few words about worldwide, because one thing that's really important in this agenda is to look worldwide. So for libraries, first of all, one thing that we luckily do not see in the UK to this extent, even though we do see flooding and various issues, is libraries and archives that are disappearing or severely damaged due to climate change. So I won't go through everything here, but just on the top row, you have University of Cape Town in South Africa, Table Mountain fire in 2021 that totally destroyed the university library. And then the manuscript you see on the right, that's from Caribbean. And in Caribbean, it's very frequently that hurricanes are destroying libraries and archival resources. So, for example, we have Grenada National Archive that was completely destroyed by Hurricane Ivan in 2004, but there were many others that were destroyed since. And, that manuscript is a register of slaves in Caribbean. So these sorts of events destroy literally history, and especially colonial history, where we are trying to still develop our knowledge of these sorts of events. And at the bottom is the Black History Center in West Tempe in the United States, Hurricane Milton in 24, and the big building is National Library of Australia, that had the particularly bad sequence of events, starting with bushfires, going into hail and storms, and was quite severely damaged in the period between 21 and 23. But then there are some amazing projects worldwide, especially in Africa. Libraries without walls, literally, information and books going to communities, like in this project in Ghana. Buildings, new buildings that completely put on its head the way how we think about libraries and sustainability. This is in Burkina Faso, and it's a passive building with almost no walls and with ventilation, without air conditioning. We think about extreme heat and we think about air conditioning. It turns out that's not the only way. In Canada, the major formal policy link created between libraries and public health in terms of the organization of cooling centers, air quality sensors, information on active living and food safety. Canadians are just amazing on the policy to do with libraries and environment and green things. In Croatia, the amazing what that country is doing, actually, there is so many different green projects. This is a particular one I love a lot, which is one of the regional libraries in a town called Kalvats, putting a library in the middle of the freshwater aquarium to talk about biodiversity. And this one is interesting in Turkey, another country with lots and lots of library environmental projects, where they're doing lots of agriculture, environmentally friendly libraries to help local communities rurally. So I'll finish there. I think my last message is probably to continue and not stop. We are going probably to quite difficult policy environment on environmental and climate issues, but a lot has been achieved, and we need to carry on.
Thank you so much, Maja. Thank you for bringing also the international element, community hubs, resilience, adaptation to climate change, all the things that we really want to be at the core of our Green Libraries program as well. And libraries as centers of innovation and resilience. So thank you. So we got some very thoughtful questions, but we are going to have Hannah first, that is going to continue this line of placemaking through literature. And I'm going to introduce, hold on, I got Hannah Trevarthen. Hannah is the director of Nottingham City of Literature and a member of the UNESCO Creative Cities of Literature Coordination Team. Prior to this, she worked at English Pen in the roles of Events and Partnerships Manager and Interim Director. And between 2019 and 2022, she led the Common Currency English Pen Centenary Celebration. She began her career in the programming team at Edinburgh International Book Festivals, and she also is working within advisory boards for Bad Betty Press, New Nottingham Journal, and Oxford Brookes University Publishing Advisory Board. Thank you. Thank you for so much work also, Hannah. So, yeah, we open the microphone.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to be here with you all, and especially on St. George's Day, which they celebrate in Barcelona, and they celebrate by giving books and roses, which feels very apt today. I'm just going to get a presentation up. Here we go. Just to share with you all. Yes, as we said, kind of my role here today is to talk a little bit about placemaking and our role as a city of literature. And I've just mentioned Barcelona, but we are part of a network of 63 cities of literature around the world, which is a designation from UNESCO, which is looking at how culture and creativity can drive sustainable urban change. And what we think about a lot in Nottingham is our role in our literary ecosystem, so how we can support, celebrate and advocate for the readers, the writers, publishers, bookshops, libraries within that, and we work in a space that is local, national and global. And the way that we have been thinking about that, particularly recently, is through a programme I'm going to talk to you about called the Nottingham Nature Poet Laureate. And as you'll see here, we say it's a voice for nature in Nottingham. And this really builds on some work that we had done previously with a young poet laureate, an incredible poet called Georgina Wilding, where we reached 50,000 people with over 50 events, lots of internationalism within that. But also we wanted to kind of take that learning and build it to align with our city policy and ambition. Nottingham, as a municipality, has a climate neutral ambition for 2028 to be the UK's first climate neutral city. And at the moment, that's going, I was just looking at the statistics for that, and there's been a kind of 46% reduction in emissions through that policy area in the city. But as an organisation, our mission is building better futures with words. So we really believe that we can help through the power of words for people to build better futures and lives, and that literature can be a great empathy engine to understand each other and the world that we live in. So our programme here really is addressing ideas around the escalating environmental crisis and the awareness and import of nature in our kind of culture, also the role of that in mental and physical well-being. And we wanted to use our position locally and globally to think about how we can champion writers and readers through nature writing, and to connect to our communities through a programme called Growing Words. So this is a little bit about what we wanted to do. So we want to kind of connect people through words and nature, and to think about the common ground that we stand upon, which is the earth, and how we do that within our cities. As a city of literature, particularly in Nottingham, our role we see is to empower the next generation of writers and readers. 30% of Nottingham's population is under 30. And we want to use the programs that we have to empower young and emerging writers and readers, and also to create employment opportunities for them as well. And really, particularly for us, to kind of nourish communities and help them to celebrate where they live. So who have we appointed? We've appointed an incredible writer called Cara Thompson, which was done through an open call and open process, with some really fantastic judges and collaborators on that programme. Some of those are nature poets. And we wanted to think about that and how we can work with a particular poet to empower our communities and audiences, especially young people who are feeling quite disenfranchised, to think around ideas around freedom of expression. And the programme was really born particularly around listening to our young people who are very concerned about the climate crisis and what's happening. So how we could kind of in tandem listen, think about how we move forward, but to also create opportunities for them to engage with their creative practice. Oh, I don't know what's happened here. Bear with me. And then, presentation seems to have stopped. Oh, here we go. Nothing like a bit of technology. So really we see the Nature Laureate as well to celebrate talent, and for us to create a platform, as we've been hearing, to talk about this global issue from a viewpoint of a young person, and to help them kind of cultivate their own kind of creative writing confidence, creativity, and really we want to create opportunities for young people to thrive and respond to the issues connected to the climate crisis. So as I've said, we've seen that particularly as a way to create legacy from our previous programmes and from our previous Poet Laureate. But for us as well, speaking into that idea around literary ecologies, to support and develop new partnerships across the city to have these conversations. I think what Piers was saying about connection, collaboration, community, that's really at the heart of what we are doing as well. So we are working within that space. That's kind of summarised a little bit here, kind of the purposes of our Growing Words programme. So really that is about nurturing the next generation of writing talent, also to get the Cara and her laureateship to connect to Nottingham's communities, for them to have these conversations. And as I've said, to work with partners, creative practitioners, to design and deliver these events. So we're thrilled to be working with partners including the Nottingham Wildlife Trust, a Green Hustle, which is a really fantastic citywide festival, and amongst other things, working with different groups, including schools across the city. So what we're kind of speaking into as well is actually a kind of piece of work done through the University of Derby around nature connection and how we can grow that. And we also have to acknowledge that as a city, 35% of our population is kind of global majority, and that we wanted to think about this and think about, within these conversations around inequality, around access to green space and nature. So we are using our work in this way to create culturally relevant opportunities that are informed by the 3 barriers I'm about to discuss. Ooh. Apologies, everybody. Here we go. And these kind of 3 issues are, as you'll see, structural, experiential, and cultural. So the program that we're developing through Growing Words will kind of speak to these issues around accessible space, the unaffordable nature of visiting them, in a kind of experiential space, thinking around how people may feel out of place and may have suffered harassment as well in these spaces, and also to kind of think and acknowledge around different value systems and how people might want to spend time in these spaces as well. Wanted to just share a little bit about Cara's journey, because she is 7 months into her tenure as the Nature Poet Laureate. She has created a really fantastic manifesto, which is really brilliant, and I think really identifies her drivers in the role. And I love this phrase: to grow green fingers, we must spend less time pointing them at each other. So thinking about community within that. And we're really thrilled as part of her laureateship. She recently shared a stage with Simon Armitage as part of his libraries tour. So that was really brilliant to see that as well. And then kind of speaking into this space that we've been discussing around the intersection between kind of climate change and policy, we were really thrilled that Cara was commissioned by Nottinghamshire County Council as part of their local nature recovery strategy that is looking at species and habitat protection. But that opens with a poem which was commissioned and Cara's written too. So we're really excited by these kind of opportunities to connect literature and policy and the kind of wider work that is happening in our region. And I think for us, we're a national portfolio organisation funded by the Arts Council. The kind of responsibility that we have to speak to our own communities, but into this kind of wider national ambition as well, about how, as cultural organisations, which is why we're all here, to think about climate responsibility and what we might do within them. That's a kind of very brief overview. I've just put our email address up here. If anyone wants to find out more information, please do be in touch with us. And I think what I just want to end on, and I think we probably will discuss in the Q&A, is I think as a city of literature, we feel we have a kind of great responsibility to think about civic imagination and how we can use that imagination to inspire our communities locally and globally to think about some solutions and actions for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. That was great. And I was thinking it would be lovely to be able to have access to the poems as well, because we can always include them in activities and make the links to the Green Library Project or other activities. We're always quite keen in terms of sharing also poetry and stories, and all the links to cities and green spaces, in particularly access to green spaces, really. So that goes very well with all the activities we are doing more and more in terms of place making. Yes.